Good evening and welcome to this wonderful evening. I'm your humble host, Coach K. I'm also the event director of ALERTATHON, a very grand event that is launched today morning. Today is also a very special day, World First Aid Day, a day where we all need to remember and also take initiatives, run, or walk, or cycle towards saving life. Today, I have a very special guest with us, Dr. Praveen Kumar. He is an orthopedic surgeon, a specialist from Chennai. Without further ado, let's get started with today's topic. Today's topic is going to be a famous topic that everybody is really interested in these days. Thanks to COVID pandemic, we started discovering and started going back in times to identify the man's one of the greatest inventions, a pair of bicycles. Okay, bicycles with two wheels. We all started loving to pedal. The pandemic has redefined the way we started looking our health and fitness. And apart from cycling, running and walking, which is kind of considered to be a professional sport, even speed walking I'm talking about, now a common man can access all the sports, including cycling, which is going to be the topic of our discussion today. I have Dr. Praveen Kumar. Dr. Praveen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kummar, for having me here.
All right. Dr. Praveen, cycling has been a wonderful man's invention. I was doing some research, when we decided to discuss about this topic. Cycling is something considered to be a wonderful piece of equipment for people to stay healthy, and also all those endurance-seeking athletes, who like to go longer, multiple hours of cycling. So a cycle is a wonderful equipment for somebody who is absolutely beginning to or contemplating even to stay fit and healthy, but also the competitive sport. The spectrum is really large and wide. And when I did some research, I found out that cycle has been there in man's tool for moving around since 1903. Okay, so 1817, okay, 1903, mixing up with the two difference. 1817, it's called as the steerable two-wheeled contraption, okay, where the, also it had a name called velocipede, hobby horse, Dreisine. Dreisine is interestingly the name given to one of the, let's say the modern day cycle, where a man would sit on the cycle and then start running. Actually, it's called as a running machine. Also, it's pretty amazing how this cycling scene has evolved over a period of so many years. So now, my association with cycling started when I was probably as old as 6 or 7 years old, where we used to rent a bicycle in Ooty for 1 rupee for 1 hour, and then it's actually seen as a very precious machine, because even getting access to a cycle was a big deal in those days. And then cycles were actually used as a means of commuting from one place to another place. What is your vivid memory of bicycles?
No, absolutely. I'm sure all of us will remember the day when we actually learned to cycle on our own. In our times, of course, when you were a kid, the most significant thing that you could achieve was how to learn ride a bicycle by yourselves. And my own memories like yours is trying to hire a bicycle for 25 paise for half an hour, and of course I also remember all the injuries that I sustained trying, and still have the scars to bear. At the time, it was generally fun, and as kids, it gave us the freedom to roam about and get into our own little adventures. Yes, certainly happy fond memories associated with cycling.
Okay, all those bruises and knee injuries. We weren't very familiar with all those injuries. You just tumble down, fall, pick up, and start running with the cycle, because also it's very expensive to fix the damages. When you rent a bicycle, you need to be very careful. Okay, you cannot afford to break something. So that used to be the memory. Now this session, I wanted to make it, a session for absolute beginners. Somebody is contemplating to cycle. Somebody is a runner who's thinking about cycling, because when we talk about, I'm part of the endurance running world, and of course cycling is something that I picked up over the last 2 years' time as a mean of cross training, and also as a wonderful mean of recovering from injuries. So for me, cycling had become a go-to equipment for beating my injury time. And also once I started realizing the benefits of some of these transferable gains, right? So when you cycle, you gain certain fitness that can also be kind of useful when you're doing endurance running. Of course, when you cycle, you also explore different parts of the country. I live in the outskirts of Bangalore. I get a chance to look at all these villages, like 300, 400 kilometers, very, very tip of Bangalore where I live. And I have the privilege of, cycling in a hybrid kind of, you can't use the road bikes here, and the roads are not so safe. Okay. And of course, we also want to talk about, the benefits of, the health benefits of cycling. And of course, any endurance sport, any sport cannot be seen in isolation without understanding the risk of injuries. Safety is a very important aspect of the discussion when we try to cycle in roads. And also, certainly, I want to talk about what is common between cycling and let's say running, right? Now, to start with, how is, as a medical professional, how do you describe the benefits of cycling for a common man?
Yeah. So, we're all familiar with, cycling, as a means for commuting, certainly, at one point of time, you just took it for granted. People used to cycle to commute, This trend to cycle for health benefits is, of course, recent in the last few decades, especially in India. So without a doubt, cycling is an endurance exercise, and it confers great benefits, and there a lot of studies done to prove that. To put it simply, it is very good to your heart, without doubt. If you have diabetes, there are plenty of studies to show that it improves your diabetic control, your blood pressure, and even, the risk of getting cancer. And there's even studies to show that the all-cause mortality, which means that, death for any cause actually goes down for people who regularly commute to work with bicycles. And these are, studies that have been done with, hundreds and thousands of people. So there's no doubt that there is plenty of health benefits from cycling.
Yeah, and as a fitness enthusiast and also a coach who's generally interested in advocating healthy habits, I generally talk about the benefits of cycling to all my clients. And also, I myself has personally gained, because I find that cycling de-stresses a lot. When you actually go out, because running is, even though running is a very exciting sport, you can even say that running is meditative. I find cycling to be even more, kind of calmer, because of course there are no running stresses and shocks. When you run every foot strike, we are basically 2 to 3 times the body weight you're kind of inducing on the joint. Very gentle on joints, and it de-stresses. And then of course it has its own benefits in terms of strengthening the bones, and wonderful way to maintain obesity, weight management, and stress management, and a great way to stay sharp and stay coordinated, because especially in India, if you're a biker who can ride a bike in any city, then of course your coordination is absolutely fantastic. And of course cycling is something which can be safely attempted by youngsters, and I think this is one of the key accomplishments in growing process. And I vividly remember my son and my daughter when they started cycling the first day. It's like, we mark the day on the calendar, it's like a big celebration. But at the same time, as we get older, it's very important to, kind of sit on a cycle and keep riding. Speed doesn't matter, the distance doesn't matter, the number of kilometers that we ride doesn't matter. But as a habit, cycling is fantastic. That I see as a great benefit for every single human being. Okay. So now, when we talk about cycling for a normal man, there is always this question of, okay, what should I buy? I remember when I was a kid, I used to remember Hercules, Rallies, and Atlas. These are some of the bikes, and all the cycles look the same. Okay, you can see that you sit on the pedal, and then if you are short, we put our leg inside that triangular bar, and then we pedal. We call it as monkey pedal. If you are tall, so be it, right? So the heights were standardized, whether it's a full cycle, half cycle, quarter cycle. These are the only 3 variations. But now you walk into a bicycle store, there are like 100 different varieties. What has changed over the years in terms of, why do we see so many varieties of bicycles?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. See, I think for someone who's just, who hasn't cycled, I get asked this question a lot of times, right from patients to friends and everybody. This is the answer that I tell them. If you are starting to cycle after a long time, see, if you had cycled only in your childhood and you're wanting to get started again, then I just ask them to, walk to a cycling store, and I ask them to buy the cheapest cycle available.
Okay, the cheapest cycle.
Cheapest cycle available with no gears, no fancy stuff. The simplest cycle that's available there. Get on it, get cycling. Get into the habit of cycling, and then of course, if your interest is kindled, and if you want to go to the next level, if you want to, and then of course there are different cycles that you can buy after that. And what invariably happens is people get, they go to the store and they get sold these expensive cycles, and before even they've spent a lot of time, and very soon, they're just lying there, not being used at all. And I've seen this happen in my family also. So
it's a great clothes stand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I would just say, especially in India, or especially in people like Chennai, which is fairly flat, I would even say, there's no need to buy even a cycle with any gears, just a simple cycle without any gears to get started. And then, of course, you can always, as you develop an interest and as you develop more mileage and, you're interested, you want to get yourself to the next level. And then, of course, all these do have their own benefits, gears and other fancy stuff. Yeah, but that's where I would start.
Okay, so your advice is just go buy just the cheapest bicycle, make that as a habit. And I think once the habit is something, if you can consistently follow for a year, then you probably can contemplate investing on an expensive pair of cycle, because of course comfort is one thing, affordability is another thing. We are spoiled for choices. Now, whenever you walk into a cycle shop, there are like so many varieties, the imported ones, the Indian ones.
Yeah.
The choice is extremely confusing. So now, when I talk about, again, when somebody buys a bicycle, so we talk about a person who's interested in cycle, he buys, assume that he follows an instruction, buys the cheapest bicycle. What is that? How can somebody progress? When we talk about cycling as a habit, you're going to sit, and then of course it's not going to be comfortable. I remember the day when I started riding, I wasn't feeling very comfortable, so my bums would hurt, my lower back would hurt, my shoulders would hurt, wrist would hurt. So there's a lot of these things going on in our physical body. So what should this person do as he's bicycling, day after day? Of course, the roads are not the same. Indian roads are not the same. Cities, some roads are very flat, some roads are, filled with potholes. And then if you're living outskirts, of course, the roads are not very, very predictably kind of laid. So what kind of physical changes that this person can see over a period of time? So what is happening to their musculoskeletal system? What is happening to the physiology? How is this person able to transform from just riding as a habit, and then how is this capabilities developed over a period of time to become a cyclist who can actually go for multiple hours, from 10-15 minutes of cycling to multiple hours? So what exactly is the transformation happening in our body?
Yeah, so that's again another very interesting question. Much like any other endurance sport, all these adaptations happen over a period of time. So initially, of course, as you're cycling, and then your lungs are lung capacity is increasing. You're trying to take in more oxygen. Again, your body is also adapting to make efficient utilization of that oxygen, and then the oxygen transport mechanism in the blood that goes into your muscles. So all the efficiency is getting tuned up, as you're increasing your mileage. So, that is with what's happening centrally. And then peripherally in the muscles, your muscles are, getting stronger. And again, the mitochondria in the muscles, the numbers are also increasing. So the capacity of the muscles are also increasing. Your joints are becoming much looser. They're lubricating well. So there, these multiple adaptations, both in in the central systems like the lungs and the hearts. Hearts are getting stronger. It's able to pump blood for longer durations, and peripherally as well in terms of muscles and bones. These adaptations happen over a period of time. And of course, the things that you mentioned, muscle soreness and all that, luckily, they don't sustain easily. Our body gets used to them, and very soon, you're able to cycle longer distances without any of these problems. And of course, with prolonged usage, there may be a few problems that can come up, which I'm sure we'll touch later. But in general, most of these initial problems, you can overcome them. And if you just, just like running, if you just stick to the 10% rule of, increasing it gradually, week by week, usually you'll be, quite safe, and you'll be able to take it to the next level and enjoy your long rides, so on and so forth.
Okay, so there's a whole lot of transformation that our body is going through in the skeletal system, the muscle system, the joints, and also the physiological system, your heart and lungs, and the circulatory system, and then of course your the central nervous system, which is also getting sharper. Your reaction time and your ability to manage stress very well. And I think cycling seems to be a great sport that way. Now, when we talk about, I want to touch upon in terms of the cardiovascular fitness, there's always this question between which is better. Is it cycling better, or it's running better, or simply walking better? Okay, so what is your view on, is cycling the best way to develop cardiovascular system, or running, or walking? Or swimming, let's say these are something that we generally talk about.
Right. So it's a very difficult question to answer, because there is absolutely no answer to it. To be honest, I wouldn't really put one sport above the other. Nor there is any evidence to say that they're all equally good. Some of them have advantages over the other in particular issues, and we can touch upon that. But generally, every sport is good, for general health, for cardiovascular fitness, even walking. There's plenty of studies which show that just walking is good enough than doing anything else. And again, swimming, a fantastic exercise. So from a cardiovascular point of view, and all of these exercises are pretty good. And of course, there are pros and cons between each of them. We can go into detail if you wish. And just one thing I would just like to say, between cycling and running is, in terms of energy consumption, to put it simply, if you have 30 minutes and, if you're running for 30 minutes, the energy consumption, if you want to spend, you're looking at spending the calories, the amount of calories that you spend running for 30 minutes, the equivalent of that would be cycling for 1 hour, roughly double it, if you're wanting to look in terms of calories or energy spent. But otherwise, purely from a cardiovascular point of view, all of them confer great benefits, and I wouldn't really choose one or the other.
Okay, and I think it all depends on your end goals, right? If your general goal is to stay healthy and fit, and walking is, supposedly one of the greatest thing that man can do at any age. And of course, if the excitement is touring and traveling, going longer distances, let's say, going from one city to another city excites you, then cycling. And again, running has its own benefits. If you want to explore a mountain or trails, You can always, I'm sure every, like you said, there's nothing like one above another, but purely comparatively, you can always say that, let's say running has certain advantages if you're generally interested in increasing your anaerobic power, anaerobic capacity. And then of course the aerobic system benefits are very common between running and cycling and swimming. And we also know that some of the most amazing and the world-class VO2 max, some of these athletes with the very highest level of VO2 max are the Nordic skiers. They seem to be doing a lot of work at a very, very high level of heart rate. And then comes running. The research says that the runners can get a pretty good VO2 max, 70 plus. That Kipchoge can reach that kind of a VO2 max. And then of course comes your cycling and other sports. It depends upon what kind of end goal you have. If you really are interested in VO2 max, and then choose the sport. And of course, even with cycling, if you are, I'm located in the outskirts of Bangalore, and there is a lot of hilly terrains. It's very demanding. Even my heart rate can reach sometime 90% of my max heart rate. Depending upon the sport and the terrain, I think the benefits are going to be very, very different. Right. Now, I was also doing some research to understand the famous cycling, the world famous cycling races. And then, of course, the notable ones are known to as, this is also called as the Grand Tour of Europe. There are 3 races. The Tour de France is which happens at the perimeter of France. It's a pretty interesting race, which started in the year 1903, span of 21 to 23 days, 3,500 kilometers of, it is insane when you look at the numbers. 3,500 kilometers is the total distance. And then the top rated athletes, the cyclists, they finish with an average speed of 41.7 kilometers per hour. That's like insane speed. If you really see the Tour de France has got 9 flat stages, 9 mountain stages, 5 hilly stages, 5 high altitude finishes, and also they have one which is considered to be the personal, what they call as the flat out. They set record in that kind of a stage. It's insane. It tests every single capability of a human being. And also you have the Giro d'Italia and also Volta di Espana. So these are again 2 more events that's happening. So what differentiates, now when we talked about the health seekers, now we are talking about these extreme athletes with, you call it as genetic advantage, or the genetic advantage in terms of their physical characteristics, or they are highly trained athletes, highly motivated, highly trained, and they can go to any extreme to win those, they're risk takers. What is the difference between somebody who is starting to cycle versus these kind of people? How do you compare these 2 segments of people?
See, when you look at purely from a scientific point of view, if you're looking at recreational cyclists and these elite cyclists, the 3 or 4 parameters, and some of them are common in running as well. Like you already mentioned, the VO2 max is something that you hear quite often. The other one is OBLA, onset of blood lactate accumulation, and then you have running economy or the cycling economy. These 3 things are actually quite common. And then, of course, with cyclists, so let's look at VO2 max. For the general public to understand, it may be very difficult for them to comprehend if I go into the formula and all that. The easiest analogy that I find is to use the analogy of an automobile or a car. What is VO2 max? It's nothing but your car engine capacity. So when you say, say it's a 1.5 liter engine or 2 liter engine, that is the capacity of the engine, and that is what a VO2 max says about you as a runner, or when you're cycling, about your whole system, including the cycle and you. Okay, and onset of blood lactate or lactic acid, what we call is, lactic acid is an end product of the metabolism. When you're doing a lot of work, lactate is what is produced, and they used to think that lactic acid was bad, but now that is not the case. It's actually quite helpful. So coming back to the car analogy, lactic acid might be, you may want to equate it to the exhaust that's coming out, because that's, again, a metabolite of the fuel that you're using. And the third one is, of course, we are talking about economy, cycling economy or running economy. That is very simply means, what it means is, when you ask, what is your mileage? How much does your car give per liter? So that is the equivalent of, it makes it simpler when you describe things like, so all these parameters are important. So when you will find that the VO2 max is a much higher level compared to, in these elite guys, compared to someone who is just doing recreational cycling, or their onset of blood lactate, or even the running economy, all these parameters you will find much higher in these elite guys. Apart from this is what I'm talking about in the values in the lab. When you assess them, this is what you'll find. But apart from that, there are changes that we've already described: the physiological changes, the anatomical changes. The cyclists predominantly do well, as they are improving their efficiency. There are, muscle fibers. There are type 1 and type 2, the slow twitch and the fast twitch fibers. So these elite guys will have a predominantly type 1 fibers, which makes their cycling very efficient. And of course, there's a fourth parameter. When you actually look at these elite guys, when you compare them, this VO2 max keeps going up, and after that it plateaus. So, if you look at the VO2 max of all the participants in Tour de France, it'll be same. So you won't necessarily see a difference between the winner and the participant. So there are other factors which actually differentiate the winner and the participants at the elite level. And there's the fourth parameter called fatigue resistance. Mm-hmm. What it essentially means is, all these parameters, if they are able to sustain throughout the race, these guys who win, they are able to sustain that even towards the end of the race. And that is why they are able to win. And that has been defined as fatigue resistance, your resistance to fatigue. So all these parameters make them really good at what they are. And of course, they are able to reach there because of the immense hours of training that they put in, and their body adaptation and mental. And so it's multifactorial. And of course, in cycling, the efficiency of the bike also comes into play. So all these together, their position, how they position themselves on the bike, the gear they wear, and like you said, the mental attitude, the fitness levels. It's all these things that take them to where they are, to put it simply.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. There's a lot of physiological, things can get very technical, but for a common man to understand, when you cycle, you gain a lot of things, right? So don't overdo it. That's the other extreme of, let's say, gaining benefits. There's a thin line that always crosses the adequate amount of training from overtraining. And I think cycling is something that is a very safe sport for somebody to even bicycle every single day. If you're commuting for work, if you really see some of these, beautiful countries, like for example, Copenhagen, and Copenhagen is considered to be one of the most cycling friendly nations and cities, right? And then there's roughly 1.4 million kilometers of cycling is done by the population, which is roughly half of the population. They're riding to work, every single day. And Amsterdam comes second with, I think it has probably roughly about 900,000 bicycles, more than the population. I don't know why they have 2 bicycles at home. And Montreal is again a very cycling friendly nation. So it's amazing to see how cycling has become part of their life. And then now in India, I've been talking to the Bikes Foundation. There are also the bicycle mayors. There's a concept of bicycle mayors. It's pretty amazing. Now even the health ministry and sports ministry, they're all working together to make our cities cycling friendly. And then encourage, because when the roads are safe and the roads are there, and I'm sure everybody wants to love to go and bicycle. Now we're all the time worried about safety. We're all the time worried about, who's going to knock me off? And of course, weather is another challenge. In Chennai, just imagine if you have to cycle to work, even if the road is good, unless you have a good shower in the workplace, you're going to be stinking all the day, right? So now when we talk about cycling as a recreational sport. Okay, now we are moving from just the health seekers. We have seen the other extreme of highly motivated, athletes, day in and out. Their job is to train every single day, 6 to 7 hours. That's a professional. We are talking about professional athletes. So now we are talking about another group of or segment of recreational athletes who are interested in kind of going beyond that health benefit. They want to be fitter, they want to get that achievement factor. There is a motivation factor, there's a social factor, and also a recognition factor. All those things gives opportunity for people to go cycle longer. For example, I've been reading about the brevets, the BRM. A lot of my friends do brevets. I've done the longest I've done is about 100 miles cycling on a hybrid bike in Bangalore. The brevets actually starts with 200 kilometers. The concept is pretty amazing. It's called as the BRM is called as the Brevets de Randon or Mondiox. Okay, so I hope I do justice to the pronunciation. So it's 200 kilometers and more, and then of course they have predetermined checkpoints, and it's like there's rallies, specific time limits you have to complete. And some of these famous brevets are the Paris-Brest and Paris, London, Edinburgh, London, again Boston, Montreal, Boston, and then of course in India there is something called as Kittur Express, which is 1,000 kilometers, Jog Falls, TN 1000, and again Mumbai, India, Mumbai. This seems to be catching up like a wildfire. Now there are a lot of cycling groups, runners and cycling enthusiasts, and today we are talking about ALERTATHON. So this is an event which is not possible as an endurance event. We were always thinking about ALERTATHON as a running event. So now we are including the riders also, walkers also, and I'm sure next year we'll probably include the swimmers, right? So provided the swimming clubs are open and people can swimming. So it's now we are using all segments of walks of life where we see that now people are going beyond their potential. They are testing, like in the ultra marathon world, we start with 50 kilometers. I think in the cycling world, probably at 200 kilometers is considered to be a brevet. Now, as a doctor, what kind of people do you come across, who get injured? And I'm sure when we talk about longer and, tougher, mentally, physically tiring and enduring. So what, kind of switching your focus on the middle distance, let's say the cyclists, who are the recreational types, who like to cycle, but they also like to go longer. And the nature of injuries, what kind of injuries people come up with. And then I'll also probably in the second part, I will also talk about, about preparing your body, because when you say a good runner, I always coach about, you need to be an athlete first. You need to be a fit person. So then think about running as a recreation sport and then getting better. But for cycling, what kind of injuries do you see, or what kind of familiar pattern? Do you see a pattern there?
Yeah. See, when you talk about injuries, first and foremost is, of course, what is in everybody's mind. When you're cycling on a road, the worst thing that can happen is to have an accident, with another vehicle.
Worst case, yeah.
That, of course, we have to be careful. And of course, there are, good drivers and bad drivers. And often, sometimes it may not be your fault, maybe somebody else's fault, and you're just lying down on the road with some injuries. Of course, with an accident like that, anything, you can break a bone or tear a muscle, or sometimes, you can have something, what we call as a road rash, where, when you fall off and you skid on the road and part of your road gets ingrained on your skin. So these are the acute injuries we worry about, and that can happen whether you're walking or running or, you're driving or whatever. Acute injuries need to be taken care of immediately, and that is there. Of course, in the context of long distance riding, what does happen is, of course, they also accumulate over a period of time, just like runners, what we call as overuse injuries. So typically, because, for longer distances, they're bending down and, getting down into that aero position. So that can, cause them to have some mechanical back pain, neck pain issues over a period of time. And there's things like, they can have knee problems, it's all the more important, to get themselves a good bike fit, where they look at certain principles. A bit this way or that way can cause knee problems, hamstring problems, we see, and prolonged position of the hands and the handlebars can cause pins and needles in the little finger side.
Yes.
What we call as ulnar nerve paraxia, paresthesia, and sometimes seating yourself in the saddle, that can cause numbness in your perineum and other areas. So these are some of the common overuse problems that we see, in long distance riding. And of course, acute injuries, like we said, you have to be careful. You can injure your head. So you need to make sure that you are wearing protective equipment, wearing a helmet, and there are other things that you can do to prevent these injuries as well. So these are some of the commonest things that I see with people going long distance riding.
Okay, that seems to be a big list of injuries or possibilities, right? So, and I think when we talk about injuries,
they're not very common, just not to put people off it.
That's right. That's right. So that's not very common. These are some extreme injuries we are talking about. Of course, talking about the safety of being a cyclist. When I try to go out, that's when we understand the kind of environment we are in, right? So and unfortunately, the Indian roads are not designed for cycling friendly. Of course, there are several attempts made by city administrators make cycling path. I always say that if you make a cycling path, make sure that there is an electric fence which is like 10 foot tall with some 220 kVA electric fence, and no vehicle dares come near that. That's the only way we can make cycling path. I've seen those little plastic cones and it gets rushed out.
Absolutely.
Even cyclists gets knocked off. It's pretty unsafe.
Very soon you'll see motorbikes running on that.
No, everybody, because the roads are not scientifically designed, so that's the biggest challenge that we have here, right? And then again, second thing is vehicle. You're behind another large vehicle, turning right or left, and then you get run over. That's another issue, and then speed breakers another. Some of these road bikes don't have the shocks. I didn't know that. The first day I sat in a saddle, I didn't realize that riding a road bike on a road, even with those little sharp, bumpy speed breakers, it'll kind of tat, right? So the technique on how you sit on a bicycle is really important. When you talk about some of these issues that you mentioned in the wrist and shoulders, I wasn't very paying attention type, right? Okay, you sit in the bike and you just cycle 1 or 2 hours later. 1 hour is okay, but when you try to extend, then of course all the pain starts, and when you come home and you realize that there's a lot of soreness in the body, right? And then switching lanes is also another issue. When you're cycling, when you want to go to the right, I've seen a lot of runners, a lot of cyclists, just putting their hand and crossing, which is the most unsafe thing anybody can do. It takes actually a few seconds to step down, walk the cycle to the other line, and go there, right? So now, of course, riding in the road needs a lot more skills, a lot more attention, and then you can't be listening to the music system, and then it is very challenging. Now, when we talk about cycling specific injuries, you mentioned about pain in the knee and the glutes and some of the overuse injuries. How can somebody stop that? How can somebody prepare themselves? Do you always advise, as a medical professional who's also into sports and injury prevention, to get fit, prepare yourself for cycling and then start cycling? Like, is there a transition period that, okay, first 3 months if I want to cycle, I'm going to worry only about fitness, then I'll start cycling? Or as you're starting your cycling, you also strengthen your system. So how does this work, doctor?
Yeah. So, and I prefer the latter because when someone is keen to start a sport, you should encourage them to get started. And you could always introduce another sport later, just as a cross training kind of thing. Start with short, just like running. Start with shorter distances. Start with 5 kilometer cycling. Week by week. Increase 10% rule. Like we talk in running. go to 20 kilometers and then perhaps, 30, gradually, yeah, when you get there slowly, usually you don't have these overuse problems. And even if you do pick up these one or two, you have just time to correct the situation so that they go away. If you start doing too much too soon, and then of course you do run into problems, and then you'll have to make drastic reductions and drastic changes because you went there very quickly. So in terms of specific things that you can do, we just talked about acute injuries. Wearing a helmet is important, of course, and you also mentioned very rightly about having a good sense of the road. That is very important in India. Which also means that you commute shorter distances, get a sense of the traffic, and then you develop on it and you get a better sense of the road. And coming back to specific injuries that we already mentioned, like for example, when you're getting your bike fit, they will look at the main, predominantly couple of things, how your knees align up when the pedals are, in this position and when the pedals are in the horizontal position. So that makes a difference, whether you're predominantly using your quadriceps or hamstrings, and if you're overusing one or the other, it can lead to anterior knee pain or hamstring problems. So it needs, the adjustment needs to be there, so that you don't run into these problems. That is easily preventable. And again, the ulnar side paresthesia that we talked about, that can easily be avoided by just, regularly changing your hand position on the handlebar. Some of the handlebars come with a drop down position, so that helps. If you have a clip-on aero bar, so you just keep changing between the three. Usually, you can avoid that. And of course, the perineal paresthesia. Again, saddles are important. It's important for you to, if one is not working, there are different models available. In fact, there are different models for men and women. You can try different things. And of course, the bicycling shorts, which with their padding.
Correct. That's quite helpful. That's very, very helpful. And I have one shot, especially if you're riding in the countryside. The roads are not very flat, and then it's always good to have that little extra cushion. It really helps.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, all these, you can, try it out at different stages and see what works for you. What works for one may not work for the other. But these are something that you can do for overuse injuries. But the most important thing, with preventing overuse injuries, whether it's running, swimming, or cycling, is the most important thing is don't do too much too soon. Wherever you want to go, take time, get there very gradually, and you'll find that most of the time you won't have any problem. And if you do develop a problem, seek attention early rather than later. And the other important thing is, even whether it's cycling or running, don't do the same thing every day. That is, you need to give, I would say 3 days a week, whether you're running or cycling. The other days you do either run or do strength training. And there's enough evidence to show that, if you strength train, it confers great benefits in terms of performance, whether it's running or cycling. One of the main determining factors, whether you're, an elite runner or recreational cyclist or an elite cyclist, is the bigger your muscles are, you perform better.
That's right.
Of course, if you're cycling uphill, that's a different issue. If you have big muscles, you have to carry them too.
Correct.
But in a straight road, if you're doing time trials where there's not much of hill climbing and all that, the performance is much better if you have bigger muscles and stronger muscles. So strength training plays a great part in improving your performance as a cyclist as well.
Yeah.
So
the talking about strength training, if you really see the ultra runners, they like to run. Of course, running is a skill that you can develop only when you run. Okay. The benefit of strength training comes into place when you want to. There's a lot of research that's done which says that when you strength train, if you're an ultra runner, the benefits are a single-digit percentage improvement in terms of your performance, but more than 50% of the benefit, more than 50%, a greater chance of you falling victim to an injury is reduced by half when you strength train. Okay, and I'm sure that's the same thing with cycling, because it's a repetitive movement, and then the muscular endurance is tested. Of course, the joint strength and the bone strength and everything is actually tested. So it's always good to strength train and mix it up with cycling, right? Maybe 3 days of, so if you're keen on cycling, 2 to 3 days cycling, 2 to 3 days easy running or some high intensity interval training to begin with, and also some amount of strength training. I've also seen a lot of benefits. If you have 10 minutes in a day, focus on conditioning exercises. The conditioning exercises could be, improving your overall, foot strength and stability, the knee joint stability. Focus on the movement. If you are going to strength train, it's always important to master the techniques first. And breathing, is something that's really important. These are something the cyclists can do. And very important thing is to stretch, right? So the conditioning workout must also include some band exercises and also stretches. It is also, I was listening to some of the scientists having a conversation. They said if you have time to meditate for 1 hour, spend half an hour meditating and then half an hour stretching. Okay, so because the meditation, whether you do it for 10 minutes or 1 hour, seems to be giving a same dose of response, in terms of relaxation, in terms of focus that you want to bring in. And then the 30 minutes, if you have extra time, you can always go for stretching, right? So it's really amazing. Now, coming back to the running, we already talked a few things about running versus cycling. Now, if I'm a runner and I'm full-time into running, let's say 3 to 4 days, I'm also mixing some strength training. I want to throw in some cycling to it. Okay, cycling, as we all know, is a great cross training, non-impact type. It is also relaxing. It also trains certain muscles where you can gain certain benefits of cycling and then take it into running. So what is your assessment of what are those transferable characteristics or benefits in terms of exercising? If I'm a runner, what can I take into cycling? What gets better? If I'm a cyclist, what gets better that I can actually take into running?
Yeah. So if you're already a runner, certainly you've improved your aerobic capacity, your heart efficiency, and all that. And certainly doing cycling, it'll only improve whatever you've already got. And what specific advantage cycling will confer is it'll improve your flexibility of the joints, and at the same time, it's also resting you from high impact activity that normally running is. So it's helping you heal, and preferentially the muscle groups are also different. You're relatively resting your muscles when you're cycling. You're resting your running muscles when you're cycling, and vice versa too. Definitely, cycling does confer benefits when you add it to your running program. Vice versa, when you look at it, if you are a pure cyclist, if you're somebody who only does cycling, and of course you will have all these cardiovascular benefits and the flexibility and all that. What you will miss out is the bone strength, because when you're
There's
running,
no impact.
Correct, you're impacting all the time, and that's a good source to improve your bone strength. But you're predominantly cycling. You're not conferring that benefit onto your bone. So certainly it helps to mix both, so that you have overall fitness.
Okay, and I also remember that when I decided to start cycling as a beginner, I was using the stationary bike in the gym for at least 2 to 3 weeks, just to loosen up the system, right? It definitely helped me, because there in a stationary bike you can ride at high speeds. You can also ride at let's say with loaded condition. You can simulate. I find this gear, a training gear like a stationary bike in a gym, a great way to understand how cycling works before we actually go out and cycling. So now the transferable benefits are really important. I use cycling as a way to relax and just go and explore. Today I did about 20 kilometers just going around the outskirts of Bangalore, and it's really amazing, especially when it's kind of about to rain, not raining, but still you can go out and enjoy the let's say the landscape. It's really beautiful. So now when we talk about cycling as an endurance sport, running as an endurance sport, running, we are very familiar that, okay, you're burning certain amount of calories in an hour, and then you need to refuel. Okay, so the mostly an average runner would refuel if you're running a marathon, let's say 4 hours to 5 hours, then you're approximately, if you're 60-70 kgs, you need about 200, 300, 250 kilocalories of energy, right? In an hour, that's the amount of energy that the body can consume. In terms, and of course, you're also utilizing the fat in the body, right? If you're running 10 kilometers, you're probably burning about 700 kilocalories, only 200, 300 kilocalories the body can accept. But in cycling, things seem to be working differently, right? It's not distance based, could be time based, could be effort based. If I'm a cyclist who's jumping new into that and I want to go, let's say 2 to 3 hours of cycling, how do you think the fueling should work?
See, the principles are essentially the same between running and cycling. And in fact, if you are planning to do racing or time trials and all that, certainly, the pre-carbohydrate loading, like all of us are familiar, that really helps. Carbohydrate is one important fuel that is really important, in long distance endurance events. So carbohydrate loading certainly helps, the previous few days or during the week, so that all your liver and the muscles are all full of glycogen, and that will certainly help you with your event. And there is one thing, there is then there's the question of having something just before the event. Some people take something an hour before, some carbohydrate an hour before their event. There's some controversy in terms of research, because what happens is when you take something just an hour before, your insulin generates in the body to help that carbohydrate to be shifted, but that insulin lingers on, and some people can find that the initial part of the run, they may find it have some difficulty, especially the new cyclists or the runners who are not used to it. Of course, people who've been doing it for a long time, their body is used to it, they still are able to perform. So you may want to be a bit careful about avoiding carbohydrate immediately before that. But then during the event, and on average, you consume about 30 grams of carbohydrate per hour on average, and you keep doing that. And of course, there is, like you mentioned, there's a limit to the amount of carbohydrate you can ingest. If you keep eating too much, then you'll have gut problems, and there is a limit to which your body can absorb. So by and large, if your event is, I don't know, if your event is within an hour or an hour and a half, you don't really have to consume a lot of carbohydrate. Even there are studies to show that even if you rinse your mouth with the carbohydrate fluid and spit it out, there are sensors there, and they'll still help you with your performance. You don't actually have to ingest. But anything beyond 2 hours, of course, you have to take care of your nutrition. In an average of 30 grams of carbohydrate, per hour would work. And if you're going beyond 3 hours, and like I said, there's an amount, there is a limit to which, your glucose may be transported. So at that point, people can trick the system by using other types of sugars which use different transport mechanisms, like fructose. So, all these things are commercially available, some glucose and fructose, and along with some water and salt, it helps you shift these substances from the gut into the body, and, that way it's available to you so that you can sustain longer distances as well. So this is the kind of general principle for endurance events that you could use.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research and evidence-based research done on the utilization of replenishing the body minerals, including sodium, because sodium seems to be playing a crucial role, especially if you're going to be riding for more than 2 hours, 3 hours. So the fluids that you consume, one of the rule of thumbs, the thumb rule that anybody can follow is to understand the sweat rate. Let's say if you're biking for 2 hours, it's always good to measure the body weight before the cycle, before you start, empty body weight, and then after 2 hours, measure the body weight, and then add all the amount of fluid. Let's say if you consume 1 liter water, add to, if your body weight is 60 in the beginning, and then let's say 58 at the end, 2 kgs down, 1 liter of water you've consumed. So net is 3 kgs. So 3 liters of water is what you're basically flushing out through sweat, and that must be replenished. And then the sodium also, there is a lot of recommendations in terms of 780 milligrams is recommended dose of sodium per liter of water that is consumed. So because sodium also has proven to play a very, very crucial role, in terms of the performance. A lot of marathoners basically start fatiguing because of not loading with the right amount of fluids, and then over consuming because the gut is busy digesting. It needs more blood circulation, but your peripheral musculoskeletal system is drawing all the blood because you're running or cycling, and then you become fatigued, right? So it has to be an evolution, right? Like as you said, start very slow, understand how your body is behaving, see the benefits, and then gradually increase. And also having a good knowledge on what kind of nutrition would work when you're a biker, and that kind of research and awareness is going to be a very important thing any cyclist would do. So if you come to the end of the show, and I would like you to probably share a few words about any words of wisdom, anything that absolutely a no-no for a beginner, absolutely a no-no,
Yeah.
Don't do this, what would that be, doctor?
Yeah. So before that, I just want to reiterate what you said about hydration also. So hydration, it's a fine balance. There are problems with under drinking water, and there are problems with over drinking. And in fact, the problems with over drinking are even more serious. So I just want to reiterate what you said.
Hyponatremia.
Yeah, hyponatremia. So what is important, like you said, I want to reiterate that people who are serious into cycling, doing many hours of it, it's really important for them to measure the weight before and after, figure out your fluid management before the race. When you are training, and it'll take several races or several cycling episodes before you figure that out. And in fact, you don't have to, compensate weight for a weight. Even if you're 3% short of what your actual weight, that is much safer. In fact, most of the elite guys who participate, they are actually 3% short of what their actual weight is. So you can afford to be 3% short of your hydration. And general rule of thumb, drinking to thirst works well.
Yes.
But when you rigorously try to overcompensate it, and people think that, okay, drinking as much water as possible, then you get into the other problem of hyponatremia, where relatively your sodium goes down. That can also lead to collapse and all that.
Okay.
It's really important to get your hydration right. This I'm only talking about serious athletes. And if you're just riding for half an hour, 1 hour, it doesn't really matter. Just drink to thirst and you'll be fine.
Yeah, you don't need to carb load if you're going to ride half an hour of cycling.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no need for us to worry about all that. And then coming back to what you said, there's one thing that I would like to mention to the cyclists is do it gradually. Don't do too much too soon. And that's the statement that I would want them to internalize it. Do it slowly. Don't do too much too soon. And that can cut down a lot of problems, and that will help them to enjoy cycling, a lot more than anything else. So yes, I wish them all the best.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It's a wonderful conversation. I saw one question asked by a person, Balu Patas. I tried a time trial of 10K cycling and simultaneously a 5K run. It's the duathlon he's talking about. And of course, triathlon is 3 events together. So we need to cut short our conversation so this can go for longer. So 10K cycling and 5K run, you can call it as a duathlon. My timing were better when I run first, then cycling. Any suggestion on this training by myself?
It's a very interesting. A lot of research has been done in the context of triathlons. They've done studies where they individually tested their running capacity and running capacity after cycling. So what happens is certainly, there is something about your muscles getting used to cycling, and it's very normal for your running to be slightly less efficient than what it normally would be. And that is to do with your, the pedaling cadence and the power of output and all that. So, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. What is important is the brick training, what they do for triathlons.
Correct.
The training them together. Do your cycling first and then you're running, and by regularly doing that, you can improve upon that. But there is a certain physiological disadvantage that you are put under when you quickly transition from cycling to running, and that's quite normal, and that's been studied, and that's something, there's nothing to worry about.
Okay.
The only way to overcome that is training.
Yeah, it's just training, right? So you basically break the habit. Sometimes you cycle, then run, and then run and cycle back to back. You're basically programming your mind, your neuromuscular system, and you're training. You're training your body to take that kind of an alternate stressor. Thank you so much, Doctor. Before we close this session, a few quick checklists. So today is a World First Aid Day. It's very important to be aware that first aid is a very important skill that all of us must take it to our heart and also get trained. Today afternoon we had a fantastic session delivered by Alert. It's a live first aid session, very interactive session. We had, I think at one point in time, we had about 120 participants. And it's very amazing to see how this Alertathon event is bringing all walks of people to attend these kind of training programs. What is surprising is still the gap, knowledge gap, skill gap in terms of understanding what you would do in case of an emergency. Because as a runner, as a cyclist, why are we connecting through this event? Because we are exposing ourselves to a lot of external dangers, things which are not in our control. If you are running in a road or cycling, you don't, even though you may be wearing the best helmet and the best, knee guard, kneecaps, or even the elbow guards, there is a lot of external elements that can basically pose a lot of danger. So it's better to be aware and take absolute safety precaution, because all this personal best and the records and all those things are important, but not at the cost of compromising the safety. We talked about the importance of having a safe riding experience, a long riding experience for the rest of the life, which is going to be good for mental health and also the physical health. But at the same time, following safety protocol is important. My personal request is, if you are a cyclist, if you are watching this show, if you're beginning to cycle, first thing is invest on a good helmet and also a bright jacket when you're out there. And also, if you have the habit of riding the bike early in the morning, make sure there are reflectors in the front. There is like the beep lights, and then also the reflectors in the back. And also carry water, and hydration is really important. Carry your ID card, and then probably some cash. So these are some basic things that if you're going out, it's really important for you to be prepared for the worst. And then, of course, as doctor said, if you're absolute beginner, invest in a cheapest bicycle, or even borrow. There's a lot of bicycles in our parking lot. Even in an apartment, there's a lot of debate going on. Okay, are they junkyard? Is it like people are junking their bicycles? They're not using, the bought it, they're not using. If you're not using, you can actually give it away to somebody who can commute to work or even to school. Oh, the schools are not happening, by the way. And then, very important is to mix your training. Do not cycle. That's what we learned from today's session, that if you need to include the cycling, running, and also any other form of exercise. Could be climbing mountains if you are living in a mountain place, or go to the beach and run barefoot, or swim, right? So these are really amazing way. And then last but not the least, get trained on first aid, because when you know the first aid and safety procedures, you're going to be not only a healthy and a fit athlete, but you're also going to be a safe athlete. I'm going to thank Alert NGO for giving me this opportunity to be the event director and also the global voice ambassador for Alert and its initiatives. And also thank you, Dr. Praveen Kumar, for... There is one amazing similarity that I found out just as I'm talking. Last year, exactly on the same day, we had our conversation, 11th of September. So we are repeating it here.
Yeah.
It's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
We didn't plan this, okay? We were contemplating between yesterday and today, but it just happened that we are talking exactly after a year, and I'm really happy. We continue our service as health professionals, and you're doing some amazing work. Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and attention. Hope you benefited from the session. Happy cycling, happy riding. And Alertathon is one more day to go. You can still contribute. And today we have seen more than 5,000 kilometers covered by various people by running, riding, and walking across the world. we'll see some more mileage. But whatever you do, wherever you do it safely. Thank you. I'm signing off from you. This is Coach K. Bye-bye.
Bye.